The CBO found that nearly 8 million Americans will, in fact, lose their insurance coverage because of the changes this bill makes to Medicaid. So how do you reconcile that with what President Trump said?
So they're trying to cut taxes, right? On one hand, they're trying to cut fraud. And on the other hand, they're trying to protect the border. There's all sorts of infrastructure stuff in there. And we can all have our feelings on whether ultimately these things are good or not. Here's a bit more from Speaker Mike Johnson on some of the cuts that are being made.
You're going to have to convince people like Susan Collins of Maine and Josh Hawley of Missouri who are worried about cuts that this bill proposes. President Trump repeatedly insisted he would not touch Medicaid and that Americans would not lose their insurance. Here's what he said just 5 days ago.
We're not changing Medicaid, and we're not changing Medicare, and we're not changing Social Security.
Can you guarantee that your voters who supported the election, particularly working class voters, will not lose health insurance under this bill?
Oh, they won't lose health insurance?
The CBO found that nearly 8 million Americans will, in fact, lose their insurance coverage because of the changes this bill makes to Medicaid. So how do you reconcile that with what President Trump said?
It's directly in line with what the president said. I've said the same. We are not cutting Medicaid in this package. There's a lot of misinformation out there about this, Jake. The numbers of Americans who are affected are those that are entwined in our work to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. And what do I mean by that? You got more than 1.4 million illegal aliens on Medicaid. Medicaid is not intended for non-U.S. citizens. It's intended for the most vulnerable populations of Americans, which is pregnant women and young single mothers, the disabled, the elderly. They are protected in what we're doing because we're preserving the resources for those who need it most. You're talking about 4.8 million able-bodied workers, young men, for example, who are on Medicaid and not working. They are choosing not to work when they can. That is called fraud. They are cheating the system. When you root out those kinds of abuses, you save the resources that are so desperately needed by the people who deserve it and need it most. That's what we're doing, and that's why this is the morality of what we're doing here is precisely right, and it comports with all the public opinion polls. When people ask whether young men, for example, who are able-bodied and have no dependents should be working, everybody says yes, and that's what our package does. So these estimates that you're hearing are accurate, but it's dealing with those numbers of people in the population, and that's going to preserve the program and strengthen it for those who need it most.
So 1.4 million people in your home state of Louisiana are on Medicaid. More than 800,000 receive SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps. Is it your contention that if any of those Louisianans lose their benefits, it's because they shouldn't have been receiving them because they were committing waste, fraud, or abuse?
Yeah, look, my district, as every district in America, has people who are on the program who shouldn't. And when you're talking about, I keep using this example, a young able-bodied man with no dependents, there's no reason he should not be working. We are the party that supports human dignity, and we find purpose and dignity in our work. It's good for the individuals involved. It's good for their community. It's good for society at large. When you're talking about work requirements, by the way, it's very flexible. It just means that you either work or you volunteer, do something meaningful in your community, or you're in a job or work training program. 20 hours a week. I mean, this is not some huge demand. If you're going to be on the public wagon, you have to do something to help pull it if you're able. And again, Jake, the purpose of this is to preserve these very necessary, very important safety net programs for the people who actually need and deserve them, and not those who are gaming the system. And I think I'll go into any town hall anywhere in America, my district or otherwise, and explain this, and everyone nods in agreement and understands it. So the Democrats are trying to twist the facts. They're trying to put out misinformation because they're going to vote against this, and there's no way to defend it. What it means is they're going to be voting for more fraud, waste, and abuse instead of the elimination of it, which is what our package does.
All right. So ironically, what you have there is Mike Johnson agreeing with the Elon portion of this, right? This is agreeing with the Doge portion of let's cut the fraud, and people who should be working that aren't working, that are getting Medicare, or people who are illegal here that are getting payments and all these things, that stuff should be cut. Obviously, I agree with that. Obviously, you agree with that. Obviously, most Americans agree with that. So what we're really hung up on, as I see it right now, is the amount of spending as it relates to border and infrastructure. Now, on the border stuff, I'm for that. If it's about $50 billion to build the border wall, I'm okay with that. Hope maybe they could do it a little bit cheaper, but I think most people want a secure border at this point. Then there's the infrastructure stuff and some other stuff, but there are going to be some cuts, but it's not kicking grandma off Medicare or Medicaid. It's kicking people who shouldn't be on there in the first place and making sure the waste isn't there. The globalists never stop. Now they're pushing airborne vaccines. No needles, no permission, just exposure. The last administration quietly funded grants for aerosol vaccines, a delivery system that could infect us without consent. Watch this. Millions were forced into the mRNA psyop, and cases of myocarditis, blood clots, and immune damage have skyrocketed. 8 states are in the process of banning these shots. The Trump administration needs to make sure this tyranny hasn't been released on the public. Dr. Peter McCullough and the wellness company created Ultimate Spike Detox with 4 times the nattokinase plus bromelain and curcumin to help break down spike proteins and support your body's natural recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. Peter McCullough, a top freedom-fighting cardiologist who risked it all. So head over to twc.health/Rubin and use code Rubin to get 15% off plus free shipping. Again, that's twc.health/Rubin and use code Rubin to get 15% off plus free shipping. Get back to that pre-COVID feeling.